Seth Rosenfeld, who is a New York City born and raised playwright, screenwriter, and film director. He most recently worked on Amazon's anthology Them, which was created by Little Marvin and co-EP'd by Lena Waithe. He also worked on Netflix's The Get Down, which was co-executive produced by Baz Luhrmann and Stephen Adly Guirgis. He has developed projects for most of the networks and streamers, and this is an extremely candid, personal, and generous interview that I think you're really gonna like. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, and I will see you on the page.
Seth, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me about your experience working both as a playwright and then transitioning to TV and film. So how did you get to become a writer, and why did you choose writing for the theater?
So I wanted to be an actor, actually. Like my sister had gone to, I grew up in New York, and my sister, New York City. My sister had gone to the High School of Performing Arts. And you know, I just felt like she was living the good life. Like I felt like people who were like, they were just having more fun than other people, and I felt like I wanted some of that. I was sort of a kid who had been bouncing around in a bit of trouble as a youth, and so I wasn't really I was pretty directionless, actually, and the trouble was getting worse. So my sister, who was really close with me, had been somebody who had encouraged me. Well, if you want to act, like, you should do it, so I took some acting classes, and I'd always written poetry. It always came pretty easy to me writing. And I realized my range as an actor was very, 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 like, I could act between here and there. Like I could play a New York street kid. That was about it, So I decided I was going to write a part for myself to star in, and my sister to be my sister in the play. And I chose a play because I had never read a movie script. I didn't know anything. But I'd read plays, and I was like, okay, and I started writing this play. It was somewhat autobiographical, and my sister kind of stole some of it and brought it. She was a member of Ensemble Studio Theater on 52nd Street. And at the time I was living right down the block from there. So she gave it to them, and they invited me to be part of a writer's program. This woman, Kate Long and Bill Sikowski, who were incredible teachers, they would have this group where you had to bring in 5 pages a week. And I told my sister the only way I would go to the writer's thing is if she came with me. So she accompanied me to this group. And what was great about it was that you had to give them 5 pages every week. So it got me into the routine of writing. And I'm naturally competitive, I played sports and shit like that. So I wanted to be the best. I wanted my 5 pages every week to be the best, And so I worked really, really, really hard on these 5 pages every week. And before, I don't know, it took a little while, but before I knew it, I was actually the best. Like I was actually the best. And which I had never really been the best. I'd wanted to be the best, but it was the thing I was the best out of this little group. I was number one. And I felt really good about that. So I wanted to do more of it, And I wound up getting involved with another theater company, but also in Hell's Kitchen, called Double Image Theater. This was in the late 80s. So a long time ago, probably irrelevant for many people, but exciting for me to talk about. They had a one-act festival there that was sponsored by Samuel French. So if you won the festival, you got published by Samuel French, and you got some money. And so they picked a bunch of, I wrote a one-act play with that company, and they picked a bunch of plays to put on, and mine was one of them. And then I wound up winning. And this was my first production, and I won what's called the Samuel French Award with it. And I was backstage at the theater, and I get a card from an agent. And I thought to myself, well, it was a woman. She's probably a scrub agent, right? Like, But having any agent is better than no agent, right?
What was a scrub agent? What do you mean?
Like a scrub, like in basketball, like a scrub is somebody who's like rides the bench. You know what I mean? Like she's probably like a D level. You know what I mean? Like, so I had one friend who was sort of in the industry, who was a producer in television, and I gave him this card, and I said, you know, this woman wants to meet with me. Should I meet with her? I think she's probably a scrub. And he's like, that's David Mamet's agency, right? That's Michael Weller's agency. Like that agency is a boutique, very high end, like blah, 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 exclusive agency. So I was like, I should meet with her then, you know? And I met with this woman and she signed me. And she was amazing because she started to teach me things about the business. In the theater, like you don't make any, there's just no money. So I was working in restaurants and stuff like that for a number of years. And then in 1990, my first full-length play that I had written about my sister and me got put on at West Beth Theater Company. Now, by now, I was a father. I had been through a lot of shit, and I had a, you know, I'll get to that, but so this play got on, but by the time it got on, I was too old to play the part, so that my acting career was over. Somebody else played it, and one night I'm in the audience, and this woman who was a pretty famous model at the time, her name is Veronica Webb. She came to me and she said, I saw your play and it was amazing. The play was also about graffiti, and it sort of dealt with early days of hip hop, and nothing like that had kind of been on yet. It was very, very early days of that stuff. And so this was the first, I think, theater piece that was kind of serious, representing that kind of world. And so she brought like Russell Simmons and George Jackson and Doug McHenry to see it, all of whom told me they loved it. And George Jackson and Doug McHenry were in New York producing New Jack City at the time. Mm. So they said to me, you know, you're like Patty Chayefsky. We want to hire you to write a bunch of screenplays and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, wow, you know, my life is about to change. You know, I was so broke at the time because I'd lost my job in the restaurant and I wasn't making any money in the theater. And it was a bad situation at home. And I had a kid that I was trying to pay child support. It was just a mess. And so I used to go every Thursday down to Independence Plaza to play with my daughter, who was in preschool there. Across the street from Independence Plaza is the Tribeca Film Center. I found out that the production offices for New Jack City were in the Tribeca Film Center. Now, these guys, George and Doug, had told me that they were going to hire me to write a bunch of shit, and then they ghosted. Like, they never contacted me, and weeks had gone by, and I was getting pretty desperate. And so I snuck in to the production offices, and it's like sort of like a, you know, production people are wheeling in costumes and props and lights and blah, blah, blah. And so it was fairly easy for me to kind of blend in. And then I just asked somebody, where's George and Doug's office? And they said there, and it was a closed door. And I opened the door, right? And so George and Doug were two Black producers. George is very heavy set. Doug is sort of thin, and he's a lawyer. And both of them are on the phone, and they have these big baskets of fruit and Evian bottles of water, right? And they're eating the fruit, they're talking on the phone, they're drinking the water. And all I could think about is like, well, I couldn't even afford to buy a bottle of Evian water right now. Like, I'm like, these guys are, the things that these guys throw away, I can't even afford to buy, you know? And at some point they noticed me in the doorway, and they actually hung up the phone, and they said to me, were your ears just buzzing? And I said, no. And they said, we were just talking about you. And I said, now would be the absolute wrong time to bullshit me, right? And they said, sit down, calm down, take a seat, you know? And I said, I mean, I really need a job. Like, I really need a job, you know? And they said, okay, well, let me ask you a question. Can you write a movie about a Chinese family? I said, yeah, my next door neighbors were Chinese. They said, you're not Chinese. You couldn't write about Chinese people. I said, listen, I know everything there is to know about Chinese people. Okay. I said, I'm not Black, but I could write about Black people too. And they looked at I was bullshitting, but they looked at each other and then they looked at me. And then they said, when are you available to go to California? I said, tomorrow. And they said, okay. And it took about 3 weeks, and it took me to meet, I had to meet Stan Lathan, who was the director, and Andre Harrell, who was another producer, and people from New Line. But 3 weeks later, they sent a limousine to my Hell's Kitchen block and drove me to the airport, and they put me on a plane first class. I had never flown first class. And then they dropped me off in a limousine at the Chateau Marmont in a bungalow, and gave me a computer and something to write. And my job was to rewrite a script. I had 2 weeks to do it. I was petrified in the Chateau Marmont. I didn't know a thing about LA, and I didn't drive. And I was scared that people could climb over the wall and would try to rob me in the bungalow. And I started to express my fear to my director, who I was working with, who laughed at me and kind of let me know where I was and like what. And he kind of would come by every day and bring me around LA and stuff, and show me stuff and talk to me about the movie he was wanting to make. And then I rewrote that script in 5 days. I was, because I had nothing to do. I was just there, and they liked what I did so much that they bought the film rights to my play that was on, and then hired me to write that. And that was how I got started in film. That's how I sort of broke through. But what I skipped over was, like, there were lots of years of nothing, and there were years of just trying to persevere, and there was sort of a lot of frustration around getting a play up, and sending it everywhere, and applying to contests and the Eugene O'Neill and the blah blah blah, and getting tons of rejection, and just putting one foot in front of the other, and just keep. For me, I didn't have a plan B, so it was the stakes were pretty high for me from day one of doing it. So it wasn't like something I was sort of saying, well, if this doesn't work out, I can always, get a job in the stock market or some shit. It was like, this has got to work out. There's no plan B. So we have got to make this work. And I think that this is a business for people who don't have a plan B. I would encourage people to be like, if you could be happy being a school teacher or doing something, do that thing, because this is too hard. This is for people who don't have other options, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing I've really noticed about you is that you always, I kind of think this is easier in New York, is you surrounded yourself with people and community all along the way. I mean, I remember when you even told me to get involved with Labyrinth back many years ago, right? You just need to have people around you, get to, and creating work.
I feel, well, for me, like I was sort of made a transition from being sort of hanging out on my block and that not working out anymore. And then I actually made a decision that I need to get to know theater people. Like, I need to get to know people. So going to EST, going to every reading, going to double image theater, taking classes, finding a peer group, and just being in that creative bubble with them it's so satisfying. Also, like, putting up your own work if you can. We did that a bunch in the early days. We find theater spaces that were inexpensive. We beg, borrow, steal to get money to produce stuff. And that's where you learn. Like, you really learn through production, and there aren't that many production opportunities for playwrights. There aren't enough often. And so you have to create them. And that was one of the things I got from being sort of out of the box anyway. It's not like I went to Juilliard or Yale or something. I was sort of a self-starter anyway. So it was natural for me to go like, I'm not waiting for EST to, you know, I saw playwrights there 10 years waiting for their plays. I'm like, I don't have 10 years. Like I'm going to do it now, you know, and I'll figure out how to do it, and I'll get with other people who are like-minded, you know, and that energy is incredible. It's just, you know, I carry it with me now, you know.
Yeah, and you've also maintained those relationships. I mean, you still know people from way back when you were still a kid in all the different circles, right?
Yep, I
Yeah.
do. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is that ever a struggle when you're super busy and juggling a bunch of projects?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a period of time that's awkward. You know, like there's a period of time when people know you as one, they know you one way, and then you start to get, in my case, I started to get a lot of success, and some of it was financial, you know. So at a fairly young age, I was making more money than my parents ever made, or I was making more money than my peer group was. And I was starting to be around, you know, people who were famous and stuff like that. And on the one hand, it's like this dream come true. So it's euphoric for you. And on the other hand, it's kind of separating you in a way from the people who you were having the same experience with. Like all of a sudden you're in a different, and there's all kinds of discomfort, resentment, you know, why him and not, you know, like all of that stuff to manage. It's not, it's not simple, you know.
Yeah, and I don't know if you want to talk about this, but you know, one of the things I've been thinking about with this series is also just all the things that about being a writer that aren't necessarily on the page, and in like self-care or filling the well or whatever. So what do you do to weather those things? It's really painful to have people, you know, to feel people that you're coming up with feel envious towards you or whatever it is. So how did you find a way to navigate that?
Well, a couple of things. I always felt like if you're going to be a writer, you have to live an interesting and a life filled with variety. You have to be able to understand a bunch of different stuff, and you have to have lots of experiences so that, you know, if I'm thrown into this kind of a story, I write inside out. I don't, you know, I'll do research and stuff like that, but I have to figure out how to connect to that. And if I can't connect to it, I'm the wrong writer for it, you know. So one of the things for me was to never stop growing and to understand a lot more about myself, to not self-destruct. So there are a variety of things that I did, you know, from getting myself into therapy at some point, from dealing with any addictive substances, behaviors, that kind of thing that could derail me. But in the process of doing that work, you're really mining. It's such a gift to do that work as a writer, because you're learning your instrument so well. It becomes like you can access parts of yourself so much easier. So I would encourage people to do sort of whatever internal, spiritual, psychological, investigate yourself in a deep way. I would, you know, I think that is one thing. And then also investigate the world, like travel, see what's out there, run with different circles, take some chances, you know, live a life that is not completely safe. I know like a lot of people don't subscribe to this. For example, I've worked in, you know, several writers' rooms in television with young writers, a lot of whom come straight from, you know, the Ivy League education to Hollywood, become somebody's assistant, and then become a writer's assistant, and then work their way into a writer's room where they stay for their duration of, you know, they spend 20 years or so in writers' rooms on different shows. And that is a perfectly fine way to do it. I mean, if that's for me, I always wanted to feel like I was a creator first. because I started as a playwright, it always felt important for me to do my own work. And, if I am working on a show, it's because I really like the show and I feel like I'm a good fit for it and it's lucrative, you know. But I'm not somebody who goes from one show to the next show to the next show to the next show, because I'm always looking for opportunities to do my own work. And that work can happen in the theater. It can happen. I still write poetry. I'm writing a musical, um, film. So I'm not. I, I sort of go where my spirit takes me as a writer, and for a while, I guess back in the sort of mid late 90s into the early 2000s, I was doing some directing films and shorts and some television and some theater. I really was enjoying wearing a director's hat. And then at some point I stopped that and I started mostly writing television and still some theater. um, but lately I've wanted to direct again, and I'm not sure why that's emerging right now, but it seems like that's going to be that I'll be making a movie soon, and I'm super excited about that. So I think like the other part of it is I think it's important to stay energized, and the only way I know to stay energized as an artist is to create a balance between what your financial needs are and and what your soul needs, I guess, and um don't create a life. I mean, some people are going to get super rich, and God bless them, but not to create a lifestyle for yourself that forces you into doing a kind of work that's soul crushing. And I've seen a lot of people do that out here. They come out to LA and they have to, have this kind of car and then this kind of house, and so and so has that house, and well, why don't I have that house? Well, shit, I better get that house. And now you have that car, that house, this family, and you need that other house, because where are you going to go on vacation if you don't have that other house? And so all of a sudden you're in this life where you're going like, I have to make this much money just to keep the lights on, which means I have to only do this kind of work. And I've never wanted to be forced into a situation like that. So while I feel like I live a pretty good lifestyle, I keep it manageable for myself.
Yeah, that's super useful. Because I was going to ask you, like, how do you weather the times in between jobs or in between gigs? I know for some writers that can be a really not only financially insecure time, but psychologically insecure. So it sounds like you make sure that you're getting fed soulfully and artistically and otherwise, always having your foot in your projects, as well as sort of having a financial plan that's works for you and your vision.
Yeah, I mean, I think like to break it down in even a more micro way, right? You have to be aware of what you spend. You have to be aware of what you spend. Okay, this is what, for me to live a life where I'm not feeling like, deprived of whatever, this is what it costs. So how do I make that? And then can I make that and still be able to do work that I love? And you won't always be able to. Look, when you're first starting out, any job, well, you're going to love it because it's a job. When I first started out, I loved it because it was a job. As I've gotten, as I've gone along, I turn away a lot of work because it has to be something that I really respond to for me to do it now. And I have the luxury of, now 30 years in this business, and people know me, and I'm somewhat sought after. So I can pick and choose a bit now. But, early on, you're just happy to be working. But the thing is like, create a little fund that you can call your fuck you money. you know, creative fun. That means like at some point you'll be able to turn away work that you don't want to have to do, you know, and create a lifestyle that is meaningful for you, but not necessarily based on the external the external things that other people care about. You know, you be disciplined and create your life, you know. And if you want to be an artist, be an artist, you know. If you want to make a lot of money, make a lot of money, you know. But that's my 2 cents on that.
What I'm hearing a lot is really strong, and maybe you wouldn't think about it this way, but sort of strong intuition. And would you say, I mean, would you consider yourself an intuitive writer, one? And two, have you always sort of been guided by your intuition? Is that something that someone can develop or grow, or how would you characterize that?
Look, you know, you have to, if you intuition is good, but you also have to learn your craft. So I'm not so I'll talk about both sides. Like I think in terms of your craft, I remember I was hired by Columbia University to teach screenwriting. And I'd never studied screenwriting. So I had, you know, like I sort of was like, how am I going to teach this? Like I know how I do it, but I don't know, you know, how it's really meant to be done. So I read a few books on screenwriting, and there was one book I really loved. It was called it was called The Sequence Theory or some shit like that. It had like it broke down the screenplay into 8 parts, you know, and the guy was brilliant in terms of articulating what each part should do. And in teaching that course, it helped me to internalize the structural things that I already knew were there. But I particularly in screenwriting and television writing, structure is everything. So you have to really learn that in a way where it's inside you, and so you can be free within that structure, you know. And it takes a while, I think, for that to happen, you know.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of intuition, I'll talk about intuition also in terms of voice, you know. And I think for, you know, people early to writing, they often really don't know what their voice is. It takes a bit of time to go like, well, what is my voice? How do I land on it? You know, you read, you know, Sam Shepard or Tennessee Williams, or, you know, Arthur Miller, or any lots of great playwrights. You can read, and you can, it's like a thumbprint. You know, you read their work and you go, oh, that, and that's inside of everybody. Everybody gets to have that. You know, everybody gets to have that thing that is theirs. You know, and it's, you have to be curious about it, and you can't contrive it. You know, if you find yourself writing and going like, well, I only have written 2 pages, I need to get out 7, and you write 5 pages that have nothing to do with what's inside of you or what's yours, it actually is destructive. It's actually better to write less, but keep it pure. And only you know what that pure thing is, but you can hear it. When somebody says those words and they're yours and they couldn't have been anybody else's, it's coming through you, you know, it's coming. And that's what you want to get to. You want to get to that point where you feel like you're almost a channel for this voice coming through. And I don't know how you would teach that to anybody, but I know what it feels like. Mm. And in terms of intuition, you know, for me, the key to intuition is excitement. So if I'm all of a sudden really excited about some idea that just sort of dawned on me, I pay attention to that. And if that excitement continues for a few days in a row, I start going like, oh, I need to move towards this thing. I don't know where this idea is taking me, but I'm being asked to move toward it. And as I move toward it, there's a dance that begins between me and it, in which it's exposing, the ideas is sort of exposing themselves to me. And then I'm getting more and more excited. And then I'm working on it. But then it may run out. At one day I may go there and it's like, well, you got nothing today. And I've learned over time to do nothing, because I used to be like, I gotta muscle it, like work harder, No, you don't have to do it that way. It often happens really quickly when you're in that place, but you have to show up for it. I show up to work every day. I
Yeah.
work, I write pretty much, I have breakfast and coffee and fuck around on the internet, and then I'm writing. And then some days I write longer than others, but I always put in a few hours. And I used to write at nighttime. When I was younger, I wrote at nighttime from like 10 o'clock at night till 2 a.m. or something. That was the only time I could slow myself down. But as I've gotten older, my brain is fresh in the morning. It's better in the morning. So
Yeah. I know sometimes you have to work on multiple projects, so you're working on a TV show and then you're working on your script, right? But if you're not working on a TV show, do you work on multiple projects? I know some people do, some people don't. And do you just follow what you're feeling that moment? How do you do that?
no, well, typically, like right now, I'm working on a movie, a pilot, a musical, um, and then I'm helping these other guys I'm helping these other guys produce their a pilot. So how do I do it? The thing that is most like sometimes I will have a certain deadline for certain things, So the thing that's most pressing, I'm working on in the morning. Then there may be some administrative stuff that is happening, and I'll take care of that. For example, I may be talking to producers about this thing, or some actor about that thing, or some Zoom call about something. I'll do that in the afternoon. If I have to write two things in the same day, then I will write the thing I'm most excited about in the morning, and then I'll write the other thing. The other thing is typically I'm doing a rewrite, which is less work for me than the initial creation. In other words, I can spend a lot more time rewriting. It doesn't take as much out of me to rewrite as it does for me to write. So I tend to want to write the thing that I'm birthing in the morning. And I usually need some kind of a break between the two things, like lunch or take a long walk or something like that. But the reason I work on more than one thing at a time is that I have this great fear of having nothing to do. And so I'd rather have like things lined up, that like are waiting for me to get to them, than be like, okay, what now? And so that's how I do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. You've been really generous. You like kind of just went through all my questions sort of organically. I'm just going to take a look here. Is there any advice that you would give theater artists moving to Los Angeles that maybe you haven't mentioned already, or even people that are already here that wanting to work in TV and film?
Well, I think if you want to be a theater artist, then I wouldn't suggest moving to Los Angeles until you've kind of established yourself a little bit in the theater, or at least really know who you are as a writer. Mm. Because once you get out here and you're in this sort of staff writing game, there isn't a lot of time to develop yourself. You're really, really, really busy articulating other people's visions. And So, you know, I always think that it's better. I'm like, for example, when I worked on the them, there was a writer, a couple of, we were mainly playwrights in the room. There's one guy who had moved from Minneapolis, this guy, I forget his last name, his first name was Dominic. And he was probably in his early 50s. And he had moved out here in his 40s after spending a bunch of time, I guess, working in the theater in Minneapolis. Apparently, that's a place that playwrights can go and make a living. I mean, there are a bunch of playwrights from Minneapolis who have moved out here who all said like, there's money out there for playwrights. So that I didn't know about all that, so I have a different route. But anyway, he was awesome. He was a terrific writer. He was terrific in the writer's room. He contributed quite a bit. And I think it was really because he knows who he is as a writer, and he's able to, he has a certain amount of confidence in his thing. And he brought that to where sometimes I feel like the younger writers who just come out, you know, early or too early get sort of eaten up and lost a bit. And so, but if you're not wanting to be a playwright and you're coming out to LA, I think LA is a hard place to come if you don't have a job or an agent. I wouldn't suggest coming out here. It's just so hard, and it can be it's different than New York, you know, here. And in terms of, I feel like New York people are a little bit more gentle to like burgeoning broke artists, even though it's harder to exist in New York and it's more expensive. But I feel like out here, people will really treat you like you don't matter. And you know, if you're not somebody in the business, you know, and for a young person, that can be not for, unless you have a really thick skin, it can be really, really difficult. So
Yeah.
And then the other thing I would say is just keep writing. Like, don't stop writing. You know, keep getting better.
A few other things coming up. Anything you want to share with us?
No, I don't want to say anything else.
Well, you shared a lot already. You'll just keep us wanting more, like a good writer. Thank you so much, Seth. I look forward to just seeing more and more, and I always love talking to you.
Me too. It's really good to see you.